UFC 271, Israel Adesanya, Robert Whittaker, Part 2. Welcome to the prelim card prediction video by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks, giving you the fight-by-fight breakdown, fight-by-fight analysis, specifically from that betting perspective. Here to let you know which fights are worth the value, which fights to avoid, some parlay action, and some underdog action as well. Of course, make sure you subscribe to the channel at Boxing MMA Picks. He goes by Zan. I go by Harris. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video and make sure you subscribe to the channel. And most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments. Very busy card, 15 fights overall on this pay-per-view event. We have 10 of them on the prelims, so we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right to work, starting with the first fight. Jeremiah Wells taking on Mathetha, aka Blood Diamond. Firefight to start this card off. Jeremiah Wells, we know he beat Warlley Alves in his debut back in June. A very explosive fighter. He's going to throw everything into his strikes. Very physically strong. Actually showed him some ground IQ in the Warlley Alves fight with the way that he was able to keep him down for a while, land some effective ground and pound as well. But he's going to be a fighter that fights at a very high pace. Naturally, you're going to ask yourself about his cardio. Never really slowed down in his debut. But that fight only lasted 6 minutes. So the question still remains, at least at the UFC level, whether or not cardio is an issue. Taking on Blood Diamond, Mathetha, only 3 professional fights. He trains with Israel Adesanya. He trains at City Kickboxing. We know the other names that exist in that camp. And he looks like he's finally getting a shot here in the UFC. Unsurprisingly, he's a kickboxer. A little bit unorthodox. He throws big. He misses big. He can definitely clean up that technique a bit as he continues to progress in his MMA career. Good kicks, nasty high kick, pretty good lead left hand as well. I will admit, can't really find too much MMA footage on Mathetha, so it's hard to accurately predict this fight in some ways. But from what I've seen, I assume both of these fighters will keep this fight on the feet. On the feet, both of these guys are explosive, but Blood Diamond to me maybe offers a little bit more diversity. I'm curious to see if Jeremiah Wells tries to incorporate some kind of ground game. Again, he had some moments in that Warlley Alves fight, so I'm curious if that is a part of his game, part of his approach. This fight should finish inside the distance. I think that's probably the most confident thing I can tell you about this fight. Otherwise, I want to go with Blood Diamond. Of course, his boy is fighting on the main event, Israel Adesanya, but it's hard for me to pick him without really truly seeing MMA footage. So almost by default, I got to go with Jeremiah Wells. I have to say this is not a confident pick to start off this card. Minus 240 is very steep as well. But in making a pick, almost by default, pretty much due to lack of footage on the other side of things, I'm going to go ahead and choose Jeremiah Wells as my pick for this fight.
Yeah, this is a good fight to kick off the card here. This looks like it's going to be a fight where they could stay on their feet. We know Blood Diamond, he has that kickboxing background, so she will be the better striker in this fight. But he's not like Adesanya with the technique. He's a lot more unorthodox. He throws things out of nowhere that could put him in a bad position. He takes a lot of chances as a striker. And in this fight, I think Jeremiah Wells is just going to take it to the ground here. He's a real MMA fighter. Mathetha hasn't fought anybody. He's a kickboxer. I expect Jeremiah Wells to just take him to the mat, ground him out. And if it stays on the feet, I think Wells has a shot to land because he is the more powerful puncher out of the two here. So I'm going to go Jeremiah Wells here, utilize the full MMA game here and get a win here.
Second fight, Douglas Silva, Andrade taking on Sergey, Morozov. For Andrade, he beat Gaetano Pirello back in October. Pretty solid on the feet, Muay Thai kickboxer, a lot of feints in his attack. He's also very explosive. So, very fire start to this MMA card here, for this UFC card, I should say. Doesn't really do a great job of setting it up, in my opinion, in terms of his explosive strikes on the feet. His offense could use a bit more activity. He's just really looking for that big shot. He doesn't really set it up well. He has good kicks though. And we know, unsurprisingly, being Brazilian, good ground game, good grappling. I wouldn't necessarily say great takedowns. We see his takedown numbers there at less than one per fight, but a pretty good grappler from what I've seen. For Sergey Morozov, he beat Khalid Taha back in July. Solid stand-up wrestling combination. We know that's a pretty good one-two punch to have in the UFC nowadays. He has good in and out movement on the feet, a lot of fakes and feints, good jab as well, good timing, good counter puncher, a pretty tight body lock, good strong clinch to that point. And he's also good on the ground. We saw him have some really good scrambling exchanges, especially in his debut versus Umar Nurmagomedov. And we also saw him dominate the ground versus Khalid Taha. So I'll keep it short. I like Morozov here. I mean, Andrade, he throws his shots sort of one at a time. And I think Morozov can avoid the power for the most part with his movement. I think Morozov is the better wrestler. I think that's where he's going to find his way to winning points and winning rounds. And I also think Morozov will have his moments on the feet just due to more activity. So I'm going Sergey Morozov minus 220. I'm not too mad at that. Andrade is, strong competition, but I really like Sergey Morozov here.
Yeah, this is a good fight as well. Sergey Morozov, he looked good in his last fight. In this fight, he's gonna have the wrestling advantage, and he can keep that wrestling pace up. I think when it comes to the stand up, I think it's safe. I think Andrade is gonna have that power advantage. I think as far as who's a better striker, I think it's gonna be pretty close that they're both gonna be able to land on each other. But again, I think this is gonna come down to the wrestling of Sergey Morozov. And I think he's going to get a win here. I think the wrestling's going to be too much, and he can keep that pace for 3 rounds. And I think that's going to be a big factor in this fight. So Sergey Morozov utilize that wrestling, and I think he gets the win here.
Third fight, and another good one here. We have AJ Dobson taking on Jacob Malkoun. For Jacob Malkoun, he beat Abdul Alhassan back in April. I will admit this is a fighter I didn't really give much credit to in general prior to that Al Hassan win, but he showed me something. He trains with Robert Whittaker, so it's not surprising to see them fight on the same card again. Very solid takedown entries, and that's what I learned about him. Good chain wrestling, good grappling shown in his last fight. On the feet, maybe serviceable at best. A good amount of jabs, a lot of fake jabs, good pressure, and he'll use some combinations to open up those takedown attempts. But again, really going back to that wrestling, he has that non-stop wrestling cardio, doesn't show any signs of slowing down whatsoever. Fairly young fighter. I think he's only 26 years old as well. So, definitely someone who can resort to that with his approach in trying to win rounds and trying to win fights. AJ Dobson is making his UFC debut. We know he competed back on a Dana White Contender Series back in September. That was a fight that you and I were very excited about to see AJ Dobson perform in. And he did what he had to do. He's an undefeated fighter, 6-0, very aggressive, high-paced starts to his fights. He can be very explosive, good power, good combinations that connect. Striking otherwise is pretty solid outside of the explosiveness, outside of the power. Good striking diversity, good long jabs, good straights. He uses all of his length. We see in this match he's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage, sort of, as well as the height advantage. So with that, the true reach advantage, for lack of a better term, might be a lot greater than 3 inches. And he has the ability to land takedowns, good ground and pound, a couple of wins on his resume via submission. So he's somebody who's, showing early signs of being a pretty complete fighter. Good fight, good odds for either fighter. This is a pick'em. So as we get later on in the video, of course, we will count both of these guys as underdogs, should we end up going with one of them as our underdog pick. For Malkoun, he may come out and wrestle all day effectively like he did in the Al Hassan fight. But I think the difference here is compared to an opponent like Al Hassan, Dobson hasn't really shown cardio concerns. Dobson has shown some wrestling of his own. And I do think Dobson will be able to stop at least some of the wrestling while using his reach advantage on the feet, keeping Malkoun at distance, not really allowing Malkoun to shoot in effectively. Also similar to Malkoun versus Phil Hawes, I think AJ Dobson has that power as well as the explosiveness to stop the fight early. Does that happen? I don't quite know. But like I said, Malkoun, serviceable at best on the feet. Dobson should have a big advantage there. Dobson could light him up, and Dobson potentially stops that takedown. So I'm going AJ Dobson here. I think he's going to win his debut. I think he's going to immediately sort of put his name on the map as a prospect. And I'm really interested to see where this fight goes. But my official pick will be AJ Dobson.
I'm looking at this fight. This might be probably the toughest fight on this card. Because when I look at Jacob Malkoun, he showed in his last fight fighting a similar opponent who wants to knock you out. He took him to the mat and he was able to keep that pace up for the 3 rounds. So overall, he might be the better MMA fighter at this point. To me, AJ Dobson looks a bit green in his striking. He gets hit a lot as well. But in this fight, the reason why it's so hard for me is because there wasn't a lot of footage for me with Dobson to see how he would handle someone that's going to consistently want to get this to the mat, someone that might have better cardio, someone that might be able to push a higher pace for a longer period of time. So yeah, this to me is a real hard fight here. I think it will either go Jacob Malkoun utilizes that wrestling, wins a 3-round decision, or gets a submission late when Dobson gasses out, where I think Dobson starches him, knocks him out in that first round. So I'm going to make my pick here. I'm going to go Dobson. The reason being, when I seen Jacob Malkoun, those takedowns, a lot of them, or all of those takedowns, were single leg takedowns. And that's how he was getting Abdul Hassan down. And I'm pretty sure Dobson saw that fight here. I'm sure he can avoid that. And you look at that Abdul Hassan, he was kind of giving him that single leg. He wasn't really making adjustments, knowing that the guy is only getting you with the single leg. He's not even getting a double leg on you. And he trips you, or he gets you down, but it starts off with that single leg. So I think Dobson can negate that. I read that he was wrestling in high school. How good he was, I don't know, but the fact that he was wrestling there tells me that he can hold his own. And I don't think Jacob Malkoun is that high of level of a wrestler. I just believe in his last fight, he was a much better wrestler than his opponent. So he looked much better in that department. But he can wrestle, but I just don't think it's that high of a level. So I'm going to go AJ Dobson here. Eventually stuff the takedowns, or even to stop the takedowns, and getting him out there in the first 2 rounds. So Dobson's my pick.
Fourth fight, we have Carlos Ulberg taking on Fabio Cherant. For Carlos Ulberg, he lost his debut to Kennedy Nzechukwu. That was almost a year ago, March 2021. The verdict is still out on how legitimate Carlos Ulberg is. I think, doesn't really have too many professional fights, 5 wins, 1 loss. Seems to be highly talented though, right? Kickboxer, light on the feet, good, quick, accurate strikes, good diverse striking as well, good movement, good combinations. We know he's a multiple-time kickboxing champion. So that's really all I need to say in terms of his striking prowess. And he has power in his hands. Not sure if it was nerves in his debut or maybe an adrenaline dump, but his cardio phased out completely or almost completely after that first round. And after that first round, he was slow, he was vulnerable, and he also showed that he might be chinny. Again, it may have been an adrenaline dump, it may have been cardio concerns. I don't exactly know. The question is sort of still out on how good Carlos Ulberg is. And he's taken Fabio Cherant, someone I don't think is that good. 7-3, he's 0-2 in the UFC, albeit decent competition. William Knight and Alonzo Menefield is where his 2 losses came from. He's a patient striker. He's relaxed in the stand-up. He seems to be an accurate striker as well. Decent striking IQ, good punch selection to that point. But again, on his end, cardio is also a bit of a concern. His pace definitely slows down. And again, I'll keep this one short. I do like Carlos Ulberg here. Cherant doesn't really give me enough offense on the feet to consider him a threat on the feet. He's more of a technician. And in my opinion, he's going against a better technician in Carlos Ulberg, again, naturally by being a multiple-time kickboxing champion. And on top of that, Fabio Cherant doesn't even really have that activity to sort of make a difference here. So not to say this is a safe pick. Again, the verdict is still out on whether Carlos Ulberg can be good in this UFC or not. But I think his activity and I think his striking diversity should make the difference here. So I'm going to pick Carlos Ulberg. I will caution from a betting perspective. I don't think minus 260 is worth it at all. I really don't even think this is a dog or pass situation. From a betting perspective, I would avoid this fight completely. But in making a pick, I'm going to go with Carlos Ulberg.
Yeah, I'm going Carlos Ulberg. When you look at the 15 strikes landed per minute for Ulberg in that one fight, kind of lets you know that he was lighting up Kennedy until his until he got tired in that fight. I don't think Fabio Cherant pushes that pace. I don't think he pushes it. I don't think his wrestling is that big of an advantage compared to the striking advantage that Ulberg has. I see Ulberg's front kick being very effective in the fight. His range, his jab. He's a very technical kickboxer. So this is a fight he should win. The pace shouldn't be that high to gas him out. And I'm sure he corrected some of those issues. Because even though he lost his last fight, again, he was landing 15 strikes per minute here in that fight. He was lighting them up. So I like Carlos in this fight, fighting a fighter that is less active compared to Kennedy, a smaller guy, and obviously not as dangerous of a striker. So I'm going to go Ulberg here. I don't think Fabio is actually the UFC level, and this might be his last fight.
Fifth fight, probably one of the harder fights for me, Alexander Hernandez versus Renato Moicano. Alexander Hernandez, I should say. He beat Mike Breeden back in October. Pretty well-rounded fighter. BJJ brown belt, at least the last time I checked. We know he has some wrestling. We know he goes for takedowns, 1.5 takedowns per fight, 35% accuracy. I don't put too much stock into takedown accuracy, but the 1.57 tells me that he does go for it. Good movement, light on the feet. I think from his well-roundedness, I like his striking the most. Pretty solid kickboxing. The boxing is pretty solid too. Crisp, sharp, straight punches. And in his last couple of wins, he's shown that he can hurt people on the feet. Got to respect that power. Of his 13 wins, 6 of them are via KO, TKO. For Renato Moicano, he beat Jay Herbert back in June. Recently won a grappling match decision to Chase Hooper as well in December. So we know he's staying active. A pretty well-rounded fighter in his own right. Good hands, good kicks, good calf kick usage. I think that'll be, or can be, especially important in this fight. He moves pretty decent laterally. Patient striker, good 1-2s. The straight punches in general are pretty solid. And he's a good counter striker. In terms of his ground game, decent takedowns, almost 2 per fight at 60% accuracy. And I do think he's the better grappler here. Like I said, really close matchup. I thought it would actually be a little bit closer in terms of the odds, but I think Renato Moicano, sort of due to name recognition, is probably getting a bit of a bump here. 2 well-rounded fighters. I think Hernandez may be slightly better on the feet, whereas I think Moicano may be slightly better on the ground. Both guys have faced stiff competition if you look back at their resume, and they have some good wins on their resume, both of them. I can see either fighter winning here, but I do feel slightly better about picking Moicano due to the ground and the grappling advantages that I believe he will have. Alexander Hernandez, just 62% takedown defense. And I think that will allow Moicano to win some of the closer rounds that I anticipate in this fight. So Renato Moicano is going to be my pick. I'm not too mad at minus 170. Maybe a straight up bet, depending on how I feel during the ring walks, or a live bet, maybe after round 1. But just in terms of making a pick for the channel, I'm going with Renato Moicano.
Yeah, this is a tough one. These guys are obviously close in skill. Moicano, he has that jiu-jitsu advantage. He was in the 145, but he's been in this division for a bit now, so he's filling out. But obviously Hernandez is going to be the stronger guy in the ring. So when it comes to the grappling exchanges, Hernandez is going to have an advantage with the strength, and that's a big thing when it comes to grappling. In this fight, though, when it comes to the stand-up, Moicano's chin is not the best, and Hernandez can throw. He can hit hard. He can knock you out with one shot. My only problem with Hernandez is he shows up some fights and then he doesn't. Like he beats Ronaldo, then he loses to Dober, beats Grutzmacher, loses to Moises, beats Breeden. So he looks good in these fights. He beat Oliver Aubin-Mercier, then lost to Donald Cerrone. So there's certain fights where he looks really well, and then you expect him, he's a favorite in the next fight, and he loses to a Donald Cerrone. So I'm not sure which Hernandez I'm going to get, obviously, come Saturday. But I think this is a good spot for him. I think he's going to be the stronger guy here. I don't think the takedowns will be there for Moicano. I think Moicano's gonna have a hard time getting us to the mat. And Hernandez, the power on the feet, I think that's gonna be the decider there. I wouldn't be surprised if Hernandez catches him. I think Renato needs to get a submission here, but I'm gonna go Hernandez here to win a decision or even knockout.
Sixth fight, we have Mana Martinez. This is actually the end of the early prelims. Mana Martinez taking on Ronnie Lawrence. For Ronnie Lawrence, it's been a year since his last fight. He beat Vince Cachero in his debut back in February of last year. A lot of constant movement, a lot of circling around the cage. He almost has that sort of awkward Dom Cruz style of stand-up in some ways. I like his kicks, good calf kick, but I really like his wrestling. I mean, of course, inflated numbers because it was his debut. But I mean, that shows you sort of all you need to see in terms of his ability to land takedowns. He'll find a way to keep you on the ground as well. I believe he's a BJJ brown belt, if I'm not mistaken. And his cardio and his pace, I mean, it seems to hold up for the entire fight. Taking on Mana Martinez, split decision win in his debut versus Guido Canetti. That was back in August. Decent movement. He's pretty quick on the feet. He's a southpaw. A lot of fakes and feints, despite it saying orthodox there. A lot of fakes and feints in his attack. A pretty dynamic striker from what I've seen. I like his combinations. And again, you got to respect the power of his 9 wins. 8 of them are via KO, TKO. The dynamic movement and the wrestling advantages are 2 key advantages here that I see for Ronnie Lawrence that will dictate this fight. I can understand why he's at minus 300 as a result. To be fair, I have seen Martinez land takedowns, but I do think Lawrence has the advantage there. I'm not going to say Ronnie Lawrence is somebody who I can confidently believe in to be a minus 300 every single time. I can't even say he definitely wins this fight, but I think the way these 2 match up, I do like Ronnie Lawrence here. I wish it was more in the minus 220, even in the minus 250 range. Minus 300 does make me shy away a bit from betting on it, but as a pick, I do like Ronnie Lawrence in the spot.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna make mine quick. I'm going Ronnie Lawrence here. He's far better grappler. The striking advantage that Mana Martinez may have in this spot is not that big, and Ronnie Lawrence can wrestle all day. If you get up, he'll take you right back down, like Marab. So he's gonna come with that heavy wrestling game. Mana Martinez will be on his back for most of the fight, and that's how I see this one going. So I'm going Ronnie Lawrence to get this done.
Fight number 7, William Knight, Maxim Grishin. William Knight's on a 2-fight win streak. He had a unanimous decision win over Alonzo Menafield back in December. That was a very close fight, if I'm not mistaken. In the stand-up, look for him to play more of that counter-puncher role. He can be explosive, definitely has the power, decent calf kick. He likes to use it often. He will try to get you against the cage and implement, some form of takedown attempts. 2 takedowns a fight, 47% accuracy. Again, those are signs that he will go for it. Has some decent transitions on the ground as well. Very physically strong. And his cardio was interesting because it did look improved in his last fight, but he did show signs of cardio issues in his previous fights. So I don't know if it was more of who he was up against and the pace of the fight, or whether it is something that has been improved. But I will say it did look better in his last fight. He's taking on Maxim Grishin, veteran, 42 professional fights. He lost to Dustin Jacoby back in February of last year. A patient striker, sometimes too patient, doesn't really have the highest work rate, but the striking is pretty clean. He will keep the fight on the feet, less than half a takedown per fight. Decent jab, decent movement, decent striking overall. Biggest problem with him is that it is really just one punch at a time. Tough fight here, Grishin, respectable 66% takedown defense. And he has competed at heavyweight. He's a pretty big guy, pretty physically strong guy as well. But we know William Knight is a physical specimen. We know he's very physically strong in his own right. And, I think he's still going to be able to land that takedown just with the brute physical strength that he has. Maxim Grishin is technically better on the feet, but I do think his inactivity will work against him. Knight, to me, has the better tools to win this fight, but William Knight just not really too trustworthy of a fighter, and I think the odds reflect that. But to that point, I think I'm okay with that. I think I'm okay with choosing William Knight in this fight, especially as an underdog. If it was a pick 'em, I would not pick William Knight. If William Knight was the favorite, I would not pick William Knight. But because William Knight is the underdog, it is making me inclined to pick him as the winner of this fight, to potentially bet on him as an underdog. Again, maybe live betting after round one. I want to see how I feel. But again, in making a pick for the channel, I am going to go William Knight.
Yeah, this is another tough fight on the card here, but William Knight, yeah, I can see him spamming those leg kicks. I can see him being effective with those leg kicks in this fight. Even trying to get this to the mat. He's going to be the younger guy. That he's really strong, so he's likely the stronger guy when it comes to the clinches. But I'm not sure, because when he fought that Asian fighter, I don't have his name here off the top of my head, but he was really small in that fight, and that fighter was able to pretty much dictate where the fight went and won an easy fight. It was, and I think the fight was a pick'em fight, and he made it look super easy in that fight. Maxim Grisham's going to have a similar size advantage, or even more, and arguably he might be the more technical guy, the better technical fighter here. He has more experience. The only thing I don't like is his age. But yeah, I'm gonna go with him. I'm gonna roll with the favorite here to get this done here. I don't think William Knight is gonna be able to handle the size, so I'm gonna go against the whole Tapology guys over there, and I'm gonna go Maxim Grisham, just being the better MMA fighter. And because again, even in his last fight versus Dustin Jacoby, he looked good, and that was a close fight. And Dustin Jacoby is lighting people up. So some people thought he won that fight. So when it's on the feet, I think he's gonna more than do enough to hold his own. And I think he's Russian, so he might be the better wrestler as well. So I'm gonna go Maxim Grisham, utilize that size, and get the win here.
Fight number 8, probably my favorite fight on the prelims. We have Alex Perez taking on Matt Schnell. Perez, it's been a while since he's competed. He lost to Davison Figueroa way back November 2020. I like his stand-up. It's good. He stays in the pocket. Very strong calf kicks. We've seen him use that to effectively end fights in the past. Likes to press forward. He likes to control the center of the octagon. A lot of fake jabs. He can definitely bang. And on top of that, he's a good wrestler. Almost 3 takedowns a fight. Very good single leg entry, specifically good cage control. Active on top as well, can really score points if he does get you down. Taking on Matt Schnell. Matt Schnell lost to Rogerio Bontorin back in May. Very methodical in the stand-up. He kind of lulls you to sleep, and then he strikes. He's a technician. Quick hands, accurate hands, good combinations. Very efficient striker. Good movement in the ring as well. And, don't let the takedown numbers fool you. I wouldn't say that's a strong part of his game, but he can take you down. I have seen it. He can grapple as well. But again, I wouldn't call that a strength of his. He's definitely going to be somebody that wants to keep it on the feet. This is an interesting matchup here because to me, Matt Schnell, as somebody who I was pretty high on in the past, he didn't really look too impressive in that Bontorin fight. He looked like he didn't really want it. He looked, his hands weren't active. He wasn't really trying to win that fight at any point in time. It almost just looked like sparring, and he was okay with losing. But then you have Perez, who hasn't competed in 15 months. So there's some question marks there naturally. If I'm looking at just analyzing this fight, skill for skill, fighter for fighter, Perez should win here. And I think the odds indicate that. Now, the odds are a little too steep for a 15-month layoff, but to conclude my point, more effective in the stand-up with the calf kicks, the better takedown game, the better ground game, and maybe even just physically stronger are several reasons why my pick is going to be Alex Perez.
Yeah, I'm going Alex Perez as well. Again, he's probably the better guy all around. I give Matt Schnell, I think he has the better submission, so he's definitely dangerous, and he definitely can pull off a submission here. But I think Alex Perez here, I think the power is going to be a big thing in this fight. So I'm going to go Alex Perez here to get this done. He's been out for a while, so this is a really tough fight to pick. I wouldn't even put this on my parlay because he's been out so long, and he's such a big favorite. So I don't think that's worth it. But for the channel, I'm going to go Alex Perez here to get this done.
Fight number 9, Roxanne Modafferi taking on the undefeated Casey O'Neill. Modafferi had a unanimous decision loss to Taylor Santos back in September. More toughness than talent at this point in her career. I mean, you look at that record. Yes, it's 45 professional fights, but 25-20. That's not somebody who you want to bet on. Very durable, though. I will say that. Very active with her movement early in the fight. A lot of head movement. A lot of jabs, herky jerky, awkward type of stand-up. Just not the most technically talented fighter. Taking on Casey O'Neill, she had a win versus Antonina Shevchenko back in October. I think that was a good win for her to legitimize how good she can be in this division, this flyweight division. Good MMA striking, trains out of Thailand, decent hands, decent kicks, constant pressure, constant pace, has wrestling, solid clinch. And she's very composed, despite how young she is. We know Modafferi is usually that litmus test for how serious of a contender you potentially can be. Some fighters like Macy Barber and Andrea Lee have fell short, but most fighters pass the test. Jennifer Maia, Lauren Murphy, Viviana Araujo, Taylor Santos. These are all fighters that have beaten Roxanne Modafferi. And, outside of Araujo, and I think Santos is on her way, but outside of Araujo, they've had title shots. So Modafferi is usually that litmus test. I think Casey O'Neill is in a great spot here to pass that test. Legitimately better everywhere in this fight. So I'm going Casey O'Neill.
Yeah, I think this is a quick one. Casey O'Neill should get this done. Better fighter everywhere. Modafferi's getting old. I think she's on her way out. So I can see Casey O'Neill outstriking her. I can see her taking her down, utilizing her grappling, her youth, and just being the stronger girl in there. But again, Roxanne's strong, so I'm not sure who's going to be stronger in the clinch, but I'm pretty confident Casey O'Neill gets this one done here.
All right, let's go on to the 10th and final fight of the prelims. We have Andrei Arlovski taking on Jared Vanderaa. Andrei Arlovski, 2-fight win streak. He beat Carlos Felipe back in October. I mean, at 43 years old, you got to look at his last 5 fights. He's 4-1. Pretty impressive. He's been taking people's power at this point in his career, and that's been working really well for him. I mean, outside of who was it that had destroyed him at that point? The UK fighter, my boy here, Aspinall. Yeah, outside of Tom Aspinall, he's been taking people's power. So you got to give him kudos there. Patient in the stand-up, keeps distance effectively, solid MMA striker, solid MMA boxing. Good combinations with the hands. He can switch stance pretty effectively too. And we know he's going to have high IQ. I mean, he's been in the game forever, over 50 professional fights. And most importantly, especially in the heavyweight division, he can fight 3 rounds without really losing pace, without really tiring out. Taking on Jared Vanderaa, he lost to Alexander Romanov in October. One of those fighters that are big, slow, sturdy. We see he comes in at the limit, 265. I think he cuts weight to make 265. So that tells you how big he is. Very hittable. Definitely has a chin, though. Has that toughness factor to him. His striking did look improved in his last fight. Regular usage of a calf kick is something I've seen him to implement. Improved as a counter striker is something I've seen from him as well. And he will not necessarily go for takedown, but definitely make it dirty against the cage if needed. I do feel good about Arlovski, though, in this fight, and I'll keep this part short. I feel good about Arlovski against these guys who aren't really contenders in this division. Again, I think about Tom Aspinall, who was a contender and who was a very easy pick for me at the time. Very reliable pick over the last 2 years. Andrei Arlovski, as I mentioned, 4-1 in his last 5. Simply put, I don't think Vanderaa has the tools to beat Arlovski outside of a puncher's chance, outside of a heavyweight beware. Of course, we know he has the size advantage, he has the weight advantage, so he may use that to his advantage, especially with the dirty boxing that he likes to do against the cage. That's really the only way I see him landing points in this fight, and I don't necessarily think he will be able to do that the entire fight. So I'm going Arlovski here. Further to that point, I can even say Arlovski via unanimous decision. I don't think Arlovski lands the knockout here. I think he gets the decision. But most importantly, just as a pick, I'm going with Andrei Arlovski, even at 43 years old, still going to get the job done here.
Yeah, this is a hard one. I know Arlovski has to be my pick, so I'll make it quick. Arlovski is who I'm going with. But I wouldn't be surprised he gets knocked out. I wouldn't be surprised if Jared bullies him, being the bigger guy, being the younger guy, the stronger guy. But Arlovski has that movement, and these are the type of fighters that he beats. These slow, plotty heavyweights that he's able to move around the ring on, where he has the better hands, and he kind of outboxes them for 3 rounds. And again, if this is close, if it's a close fight, if it can go either way, these veterans get that veteran judging bias that happens with a lot of these veterans. When they're in these close fights, they always get the benefit of the doubt with the judges. So again, if this stays close, I see Arlovski getting his hand raised. But I think he should win a decision here, but he's still Arlovski, and all it takes is one shot, right? So be careful with this one. I think you got to be real careful with this one as far as confidence goes. But I have to make a pick. I'm going to go Arlovski, but I can't put this on my confident parlay.
Completely agreed there. Speaking of parlay, let's kind of take it to Vegas. Let's take a look at what some of the odds are looking like. And let's kind of start on the underdog side of things. I will actually kick that off. 2 underdogs that I'm looking at, and I mentioned it earlier in the video. Malkoun versus AJ Dobson, technically a pick'em, right? So technically you can count either of those guys as underdogs. And we know I'm going with AJ Dobson in that one. So AJ Dobson is going to be one of my underdog picks. My other underdog pick is going to be William Knight. Not going to suggest parlaying them together, but just showing you a -110 pick'em as well as a +140 in William Knight. AJ Dobson, William Knight, those are my 2 underdog picks.
All right, so for my underdog, I'm going with Alexander Hernandez.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Yeah, +140, solid value there. Quality fighter, probably the better striking. I can definitely see that being a good one. In terms of favorites, again, I'll go first here. I have 2 favorites that I know I like for sure. That being Casey O'Neill as well as Ronnie Lawrence. If you're somebody who's chasing payout, a 1.66 is probably not going to be enough for you. If I were to force a third fight, and I'm not going to officially endorse forcing a third pick, but if I had to, I'm probably looking at Morozov to make it a 2.4. I might be looking at, even Perez to make it a double up at 2.08. And that's probably the only third picks I would consider. But I think officially, I really just want to stick with the win here. And I want to stick with Casey O'Neill as well as Ronnie Lawrence. It is only a 66% return. So $100 will return 166. And for our bigger bettors, $250 will return 416.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Ronnie Lawrence, Carlos Ulberg, Casey O'Neill, and Sergey Morozov.
Yeah, it's a good one. That's a good one. 4 fights there, 3.47. $100 will return 347. For our bigger bettors, $250 will return 869 for a very possible winning ticket there in terms of a couple of favorites or a parlay action. But let's end it there. That is the end of our prelim card prediction video. Of course, our main card prediction video is coming up next. Make sure you subscribe to the channel at Boxingmmapicks. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. Most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments. Let us know how you feel. Let us know what your picks are. Let us know how you feel about our picks. Who's your underdog? What parlays are you looking at? Mention all of that in the comments. But officially signing out, he goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. We are Boxing MMA Picks, giving you our prelim card prediction video for UFC 271, Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2. And in our usual fashion, let's get this money.
Let's go.